Association's Pre-66 Grand Prix car race. Let's take a look at our grid, and it is dominated by the garagistes, the British manufacturers who took over the reins at the front of Formula One in the rear-engine revolution. Coopers on the front row, poleman Will Nuttall and Michael Gans, and Charlie Martin, another Cooper, lining up in third ahead of the ex-Jim Clark Lotus of Andy Middlehurst. One of Jack Brabham's BT3/4s, Tim Child, lines up fifth, ahead of another Cooper of Justin Mayers. And there are a bunch more of the rear-engine cars, including the BRM P261 of Philip Boonhofer and the Lotus 18, the earlier car of Andrew Beaumont, ahead of the first front-engine car in 10th place, Tony Wood, in the Tech-Mech Maserati. Behind him, Coopers, Brabhams and more Lotuses. And then Andrew Haddon starting 17th in the Scarab with its Offenhauser engine, ahead of another front-engine car, the Maserati 250F of John Spears. The Scarab of Eddie Maguire starts in 23rd place. The Curtis Roadster with its 5-litre six-cylinder straight engine is in 26th place, ahead of another 250F. And the rest of the field comprising a compromise between the last of the front-engine cars and the resurgent rear-engined new boys. Julian Ellison in his Assegai, the car built in South Africa, did not get to practice, but hopefully will make it onto the back of the grid. Well, we had an entry of 44 cars for this race, and of that, possibly 8 were front-engined. That's how dramatic the change was at the turn of the 60s. It's hard to imagine now that 60 years have passed since putting the engine behind the driver very much took over. Lights are off on the safety car. This is the formation lap for these pre-66 Grand Prix cars. Small, light, yet to sprout aerodynamic aids. These are the classic Scalextric cars of your youth, but in real life, more than 40 of them coming up towards the start here at Silverstone, and some towards the tail of the field really need to catch up. The race will be started long before they get into our 2x2 formation. It is Will Nuttall on pole position from Michael Gans. And Gans with the pale-coloured car. He's going to be a little easier to spot between everything else, which is predominantly British racing green. There you can see the red car of Tim Child, his Brabham BT3/4. We are ready to go racing. The lights change, we are underway for 20 minutes of ferocious pre-1966 Grand Prix action. Will Nuttall and Michael Gans charging down into the first corner with 40 similar cars behind them. The battle between the front-engined dinosaurs and the new rear-engined revolution continues, and Michael Gans dropping back down into third place at the start as his Cooper gets mugged by Charlie Martin, who looks like he made a very good start up into second place. Car number 59. Is it him or Will Nuttall that leads? Two pretty identical liveried Coopers. And look out as well for the Lotus 25 of Andy Middlehurst, the green car with the yellow stripe. It's about 5 back with the yellow wobbly wheels. That car, a guaranteed race winner in many pre-66 races. Martin Haven and Alistair Douglas watching the action as the Coopers dominate the start.
And it's Will Nuttall in those two, as you say, similar coloured cars, but Will Nuttall who does lead from pole position, Charlie Martin in second place, and then we've got Michael Gans in there as well, and Andy Middlehurst lost a place coming out of the loop in the ex-Jim Clark Lotus 25, and you can see how much lower that car is than any of the others around it. There it is turning into Cox Corner, and a wonderful car from Andy Middlehurst in about 5th place now, but the leaders coming up towards through Maggots now, and there in 3rd place is Michael Gans, who we spoke to in the assembly area, but making a bit of a break here is Will Nuttall from Charlie Martin in second place, being challenged by Michael Gans in the later Cooper T79 and onto the hanger straight.
Right, I think we've misidentified that. That is not Charlie Martin in second place, unless I've really read that wrong. That's car number 12, Rudiger Friedrichs, who's come scorching through from 7th on the grid. It is Friedrichs, look at that. What a start, 7th to 2nd. I mean, the tide really opened from him. Look at him three-wheeling his way through there. That's the way these cars gain their traction, all at the rear wheels. Michael Gans slots his way through back into second place in the later Type T79 Cooper. So again, you can see a very different look, less of a sort of beetle back to the car that you saw in the T53s of Will Nuttall, the leader, and of Rudiger Friedrichs. The T79, a little bit more recent in development, much more like the Lotus 25 that you'll see there in 5th place, being driven by Andy Middlehurst. So Middlehurst already a winner once today in a very different car, in a fire-spitting turbocharged Nissan Skyline 4-wheel drive touring car beast. Now he's got a light, nimble Lotus, the car driven in period by late great Jim Clark, and he will start to try and fight his way up the order. But it is Will Nuttall from pole position that leads from Michael Gans, and you can see in the background the tall shape of the first front engine car, the Tech-Mech Maserati of Tony Wood, who qualified 10th. Probably got mugged at the start. He got shuffled back down the order. I think he's lost 2 or 3 places on this opening lap. But goodness me, Rudiger Friedrichs, car number 12, what a big start he made, Alistair.
Absolutely, yes, and my apologies as well to Rudy, because just assumed it was Charlie Martin had come up there, but a great start from him as we look at the predominantly white-coloured number 17 of Michael Gans.
Well, Charlie Martin has just about disappeared, and I'm not sure quite this happened. Rudiger Friedrichs coming from not even row 3, row 4 of the grid. So something opens up very well for him on the inside. Don't really see it there in the first corner. He hadn't got through at that stage. So maybe in the next couple of tight sequences, that's where it all worked out for him. Well, Rudiger was wheeling his Alvis Firefly special round to great effect. Second place in a car that was, what, 60 years older than this, or 50 years older than this in the pre-war sports car race. So he's really sort of striding or straddling generations here. A 1912 car, now he's racing what vintage is this Cooper, a 1960 Cooper T53, again with that early look of the rear engine Cooper, that beetle back that Black Jack Brabham drove to Grand Prix success, before he of course then went on to start his own manufacturing concern, and there are Brabhams in this race as well, so double Brabham links there with the Coopers that he raced in period and his own cars. But the race leader is now Rudiger Friedrichs. So what has happened there? Again we're having trouble with the transponders. Will Nuttall, Michael Gans are still there. Rudy Friedrichs is in 3rd place. More battles a little further back. There's Tony Wood. Is that Tony Wood? No, yes, that's the Tech-Mech Maserati.
Yeah, he's leading the front-engined class, as we saw. He was first on the grid in front-engine, but he's holding on to that lead. The Tech-Mech Maserati, a later development of the wonderful 250F. I'm sorry to say it doesn't really do it for me. The 250F looks right. This is a little bit lower at the front.
Well, you know what it looks like? It looks like a US dirt sprint midget, but yes, sized up, you know, with that big back behind the driver. And you could see, like, you don't need to know anything about aerodynamics. Look at the car in front of it, car number 18, the little Lotus 18, and look at the size of the Maserati behind it. Just that alone, the extra height that's rolling around in the corners, the extra frontal area of that big engine cover in front, and the driver sitting up so high because you've got to clear the transmission. Just that alone, even if it's no more powerful, even if it's got better road holding, just those aerodynamic deficits are always going to hinder it. And that's a big part of why the rear engine revolution was so successful. Cars got much smaller. And of course, just after this era, cars went down to 1.5 litres in Formula One, and nothing with a 1.5 litre front engine was ever going to be able to hold the candle to the rear engine cars.
The car we're looking at now, the one you briefly mentioned that was so much smaller, well, that is the Lotus 18, correctly numbered there for Clinton McCarthy, but it has a very, very strong connection indeed to a very successful driver, that of Jim Clark. And Clinton McCarthy's car was Jim Clark's first single-seater win in this very car in 1960 at Brands Hatch. And look what happened after that. We lost Jim Clark in 1968, but who knows what would have happened after that had he survived. But in the early stages of his career, he drove this car. It was his very first Formula win.
So 62 years ago this year, his car was a race winner. Now, with the slightly newer cars in front of it, including the Lotus 25 of Andy Middlehurst just up in 5th place, that's probably not going to happen here, but it was a successful car in period. The car that Stirling Moss won at Monaco in 1821, so the same car but with a few upgrades, run by Rob Walker. We saw that car in action yesterday, ended up in the wall, and actually didn't check to see whether it made the grid or not.
I believe it did, Martin. I saw it. Yes, it was Nick Fennell, wasn't it? Was it Nick Fennell's car?
Yeah, I think so. So meanwhile, here is the Lotus in that familiar green and gold, or green and yellow. Oh, and a big spin for is that Brabham or a BRM? That's a Brabham.
That's the Lotus, isn't it, with the BRM colours?
Ah, yes, indeed, yeah.
The coloured like that for the 1966 film Grand Prix.
Now, we've been told, actually, it's Philip Buhofer, car number 50, so that is a genuine BRM.
Ah, OK.
In which case, before the cumbersome H16, that's a 1.5 Climax engine car, as most of these are. So, yes, no, there is, as you said,
yes.
A facsimile BRM-ish, or sorry, very BRM colour schemey car running around, a Lotus that was used in John Frankenheimer's movie Grand Prix. And again, you know, these are cars of that era. You just saw a very quick look at the Scarab. There's a Cooper Bristol, now the classic sort of early starters car. It was run in Formula 2 in period, but was occasionally used, as often was the case. Formula 2 cars are often used to bolster fairly thin Formula 1 grids, and the likes of Mike Hawthorne made their name. Mike Hawthorne particularly made his name in a Cooper Bristol, the dapper English driver who then went on to be Formula 1 world champion just before the turn of the 60s. So the Cooper Bristol, front-engined 2-litre Bristol engine, developed down in Filton by the Bristol Aircraft Company post-World War II from BMW origins. When I say from BMW origins, they basically photocopied the design and put their own name on it. So that's where the Bristol engine came from. Very successful. We'll see a lot of them in sports racing cars as well, in the pre-66 sports car racing, and they were a successful road engine as well. 2-litre Bristol engines found their way into things like the AC Ace that begat the AC Cobra. So it was a real fundamental part in the late 50s, particularly of British racing and getting cars on grids. Here is another classic Cooper shape, the Cooper T45, the pale green car with the white noseband. That is Mark Daniel, car number 9. What position? He's battling for 10th place. Right behind him, another car with a 9 in it, 91, and that's Chris Drake, another Cooper, but a later model, as you can see, type 71, 73. Very different look. Now, those cars are, what, 3 or 4 seasons apart, and look how they developed from those early hunchback cars, the 35 and the 59, and then the T70, 71, 73 of Chris Drake going by. Looks like it's almost a decade newer, and yet there's just a couple of years between them. Chris Drake's car from 64, and the car he passed was from 58, so just 6 seasons of development going into that. With our race leader, Will Nuttall, out front by 3.4 seconds from Michael Gans. Michael saying he was trying to make a race of this, try and give Will Nuttall a chase, but it looks like Will Nuttall escaped on lap 1 and remains away.
That's Chris Drake, I think, is it? It's just spun into the pit lane entry.
It's unfortunate, wrong pit lane for him as well.
Yes, it is Chris Drake. Yes,
yep.
So we'll give you that one for the commentator's curse then, Martin. I've had my share this weekend.
Yes, you certainly have. Well, Will Nuttall driving this car in approved style. Now, of course, since these cars were developed or designed initially in the 1960s, an awful lot has come on in terms of tyre technology, brake technology, metallurgy, oil technology to make them more reliable, but drivers are just as capable of overstepping the marks. Don't forget, these are very narrow tyres. Although they're all 1.5 litre engines, they're producing 160, 175 brake horsepower, probably closer to 200 brake horsepower from the 1.5 litre Climax engine. And they're on 5.5 inch wide tyres. So there's not an awful lot of grip, and there's nothing in the way of aerodynamic aids. There's the leader, takes a long look in his mirrors, Will Nuttall, as he comes down the Wellington Straight to see where Michael Gans is. Whoa! And that's why, because he's not just being flamboyant, this car is starting to develop a bit of a rear steer of its own. Either that, or he was looking in the mirrors and just very slightly missed his turn-in point there as he got down to Brooklands. But I would not expect a driver leading a race like this to have quite so much of a big handful of opposite at Brooklands.
And Will Nuttall about to pass the unique Assegai, which you briefly mentioned when you were running through the grid. And that, as you said, a South African car. Didn't race in Grand Prix that counted for the World Championship, raced in non-championship Formula One races, but copied the sharp-nosed design of the Ferrari of the era. As we look at the second-placed car, which is Michael Gans, a car driven in period by the great Bruce McLaren in the Tasman Series in 1965. Tasman Series was an off-season flyaway series that earned money for the drivers. That was the important thing. They weren't highly paid Grand Prix drivers of this period, so they all used to fly off to the southern climes for the Tasman Series, and drivers like Jim Clark and Graham Hill, and that was a way of earning a bit of extra cash.
And for the manufacturers as well, because the likes of Lotus and Brabham and Cooper would send their drivers, and they would pack the cars away on the boats as well, but the cars would never come back. Money would come in the opposite direction, and that's what started a big motor racing scene in the Antipodes, in Australia and New Zealand. It was a great way, as in the 50s, the races, the Temporada races and so on in South America, were a great way of racing abroad, being paid to go and race, and also earning currency to pay for next year's chassis by selling this year's cars. And when you bought them hot off the track from the team, rather than ordering them by telex and then waiting 6 weeks for it to arrive on a boat, you knew what you were going to get, because Jim Clark had just stepped out of it. It wasn't some bitzer assembled, you know, sort of on a Friday afternoon and just bundled off. So it was a really good way for up-and-coming race teams and drivers to buy a very competitive car on their doorstep, and you knew what you were getting, and that's why it was so successful for so many years. Of course, they quite often ran with different engine formulas, so you quite often find that Tasman cars would have, say, a 2.5 litre engine, because they weren't restricted to Formula One 1.5 litres, but the rest of the car would be the same. And the final note on that red car they've just gone by, the Assegai from South Africa, but of course named after the Zulu war spear.
Correct.
So there you go. All sorts of random ephemera surrounds Formula One cars that you never really thought of. Looking at close battle here, aren't we?
We are, yes, and the car in the middle of it, the green car with the yellow stripe, is the driver we've seen out before, Andy Middlehurst, car number 25. That is a Lotus 25, and it's not just any Lotus 25, it's the car that Jim Clark took to 7 World Championship wins in 1963, and they only had 10 races then. We're talking sort of Lewis Hamilton, Max Verstappen style of domination in this very car that Andy Middlehurst now owns, and it's great to see that Andy runs a similar helmet to Jim Clark wore. That's the dark blue with the white peak, so reminiscent, although most of the pictures these days, I'm afraid, that we see are black and white, so you can't really see that, but that's what it looked like in 1963, standing at Silverstone watching a Grand Prix.
Yeah, he doesn't go with the peak, he's gone with the little white little banner across the top.
Yeah.
But yes, I mean, we saw that, didn't we, in the previous historic Formula One race, is that, you know, guys like Ewan Surgerson, who've got a car that was so closely associated with the driver, in his case with Clay Regazzoni, he runs a Regazzoni replica helmet. He's not pretending he's Clay Regazzoni any more than Andy Middlehurst is pretending that he's Jim Clark, but it adds to the overall impression. This is about as close as you could see to Jim Clark racing his own car in 60 years after his death, so 50 years after his death. So Middlehurst very much in tribute and driving it in a style in which I'm sure he hopes that Jim Clark will be happy to see it being driven. Absolutely no quarter given. Will Nuttall still leading from Michael Gans, Rudiger Friedrichs in third, but that is Andy Middlehurst in the battle for fourth place with Justin Mears. Justin Mears in another of the Coopers. And Justin Mears just hanging on at the moment, so there's a little bit of an age difference between him and the Andy Middlehurst Lotus behind, but not as much really in real terms as there is with car number 77 there, this maroon and white Curtis 500. Now Curtis were famous for building Indy cars. This is an Indy car. Pure and simple. It's an Indy Roadster. It's got an Indy Offenhauser engine. It is a Curtis chassis. They were very, very common. They were as common in IndyCar racing as a Lotus or a Brabham or a Cooper was in Grand Prix racing. It is a front engine car. And the reason it's here is that in this period, the Indy 500 nominally qualified as a round of the Formula One World Championship. Not many people went and raced and earned Formula One World Championship points in the Indy 500. And of course, by the time Lotus went with Graham Hill, Jim Clark and so on, that was no longer the case, so it didn't count as a World Championship Grand Prix. But here you've got a great American battle. The 5-litre Curtis just ahead of the blue Scarab. So the Scarab's running with an Offenhauser engine, but a 4-cylinder Offie engine of a 2.5-litre capacity. So a very different mix of two IndyCar-based cars. And is that? No, that's the Lotus 18, car number 46. That's Robert Pullen's car. So he's pulling off at the side of the road. Meanwhile, here is our race leader. How much we've got on the clock? Just a minute or so. Where is he on the circuit? Is this... Yes, this is him on to the last lap. The clock will have run down to 0 by the time Will Nuttall gets back to the line, so they'll be readying the checkered flag for him. Or will they? In all of our races this morning, at least one car that was heading for a podium finish in the final 5 minutes retired. We had at least one winner potentially retire, but at the moment Will Nuttall going great guns in the Brabham. Just goes by the car that is in. Just trying to figure, actually 28th place, so 27 cars still on the lead lap after 20 minutes of this ferocious racing. May not all be able to match the pace of Will Nuttall. More than half our field, 2/3 of our field still on the lead lap. Will Nuttall's not getting away from Michael Gans, but that gap has been over 3 seconds for much of the race. Michael is not able to close on him as Will goes by Paul Griffin's Cooper T51, a car that's 2 or 3 years older than the leader's T53. Rudiger Friedrichs made that great start at the beginning of the race to come up from 7th on the grid to 2nd place, and then got shuffled back down to 3rd, but he remains in 3rd. He's the big mover from the qualifying spots, up 4 from where he qualified.
But that 3rd, 4th, 5th and 6th battle that we were watching a few seconds ago is certainly not resolved, is it? No. We know Will Nuttall certainly coming down into Stoke Corner for the last time, but we need to watch that 3rd place battle. Yeah,
looks like this is all Will Nuttall's to lose, and I don't think he's in the habit of giving it away. Michael Gans should finish 2nd, but you're absolutely right. Rudiger Friedrichs, Justin Mears, Charlie Martin and Andy Middlehurst all battling for 4th position. Checker flag awaits for Will Nuttall. Big sideways slide out of the final corner to claim victory by 3 seconds over Michael Gans. And Rudiger Friedrichs completes the podium in 3rd place, or should do, but who will be first across the line? Here they come. The battle we are waiting for coming out of the final corner. There they go. 3 of the 4 together. It is Charlie Martin behind Rudiger Friedrichs and ahead of Justin Mears and Andy Middlehurst. So Middlehurst in the newest of the bunch there, the Lotus 25. did not manage to get the better of Justin Mayers. Charlie Martin chasing just about a second, 2.5 seconds behind Rudiger Friedrichs across the line. So there, car number 17, Michael Gans, your second place finisher. Following home, Will Nuttall. So Cooper T53, Will Nuttall the race winner, and Michael Gans in second place in a later Cooper T79, and Rudiger Friedrichs in third in another 1960 T53. So Michael Gans with the newer of the cars, built in 1964. Will Nuttall's car and Rudiger Friedrichs' car, both built by the team in 1960. So that's the difference in performance, very slight, but the difference in look between the cars, quite notable. The Beetlebacks of the T53 and the much more cigar-shaped T79, the later car, Michael Gans, between the two of them. Will Nuttall very happy with that. Silverstone Grand Prix circuit, beautiful weather and close racing in some fabulous Grand Prix cars. Hard to imagine a better way to spend a Saturday for a petrol head, isn't it? And what was the resolution? Oh, TV screen's just gone off. Didn't see the resolution of the battle between our front engine cars. I think in the end, Tony Wood's Tecmec Maserati was comfortably ahead. We didn't see him struggling, so he should hopefully have completed that. Looking here on the slowing down lap, car that we didn't see a lot of, John Clark's T56 Cooper. Oh dear. Well, I suppose after the flag is marginally better, certainly not any cheaper for the Scarab to start spewing oil smoke. That's Andrew Haddon's car. 2 Scarabs here. It was a 2-car effort in 1960. I think they continued into 1961, but it was a fairly short-lived foray as a Grand Prix manufacturer. That is leaving a lot of oil smoke. Car number 5, Michael Birch in the B-type Connaught. Last time we saw this, Michael was standing beside the car and there was a mechanic in the car, his ankles being held by a colleague at roll bar height as he was upside down, back to front in the pedal box area, trying to fix an issue with the car. That's the sort of serviceability access that Formula One cars had then. And to be honest, I don't suppose it's very different now. I'm not sure that changing a pedal box on Lewis Hamilton's Mercedes is the work of a moment either. And number 7, Nick Topless, another very well-known historic racer, and they're in a low-line Cooper T53. Different version of the Beetleback car that has won this race in the hands of Will Nuttall. So Michael Gans pulls up alongside him. I'm sure he is happy with second, probably thought that that's pretty much where he was going to get to. See alongside them Ian Nuttall in the Mark II Cooper Bristol, racing in a different class, all sorts of different categories here, as you can imagine, with the plethora of different cars. Right, after you, Claude, figure out who's going where. So, all part of the feel of these races. A lot of drivers, as you can see with Michael Gans, using period-looking overalls, the sort of pale blue Dunlop overalls that were very much the go. Will Nuttall victorious in the Pre-66 Grand Prix race ahead of Michael Gans. And look at the Cooper domination. Rudiger Friedrichs completed an all-Cooper podium, backed up by Charlie Martin and Justin Mayers in 4th and 5th. Andy Middlehurst, the first non-Cooper in the ex-Jim Clark Lotus 25, ahead of the best Brabham of Tim Child. And it was all about rear-engined constructors in the top 10. The first front-engine car home was Andrew Haddon's Scarab, which smoked towards the end of the race. Tony Wood's Tech Mech losing out that front-engine battle. Third of the front-engine cars, the Maserati 250F of John Spears. British-based manufacturers Cooper, and particularly Cooper, so strong in this Pre-66 era with Lotus in there as well. Geraint Owen in doing valiant hooligan work in the Curtis. Skids aplenty. And Eddie Maguire's second Scarab rather, coming home in 26th place with one of the continuation Maseratis of Klaus Leyer just inside the top 30 in this bumper field. And they were predominantly hugely reliable as well. These cars, the cut-off date 1966, so 56 years ago. The newest of these cars was racing, and some of them already well into their 6th decade as racing cars. The rolling start and the sound of not 1, not 2, not 3, but probably 4 or 5 Grand Prix grids worth of 1.5 litre engines sweeping down, with Will Nuttall taking the early lead. Rudiger Friedrichs jumping up from 7th on the grid to be a podium contender, lying 2nd early on before fading slightly. And then a spin for one of the BRMs. Andy Middlehurst in the Lotus 25, the best non-Cooper in the field. He was battling in the top half dozen. And in the front engine battle, the Tech Mech Maserati losing out in the end to one of the Scarabs, the Curtis, and the other Scarab though having great front engine roadster fun all the way through the race. Will Nuttall kept his calm, kept his pace and kept his lead. Cooper's sweeping the podium and the top 5 positions with Will Nuttall on top.